Well, here you are, on a week-long trek through the Himalayas. You're exhausted, the cold is cutting through to your bones, and suddenly, you stumble upon a human skeleton near a lake. You look around, and there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of bones scattered across the ground. Well, guess what? This really happened in 1942 with an Indian forest official. Since this chilling discovery, researchers have been trying to figure out how so many people lost their lives in such a remote, isolated spot. So, what happened up there? We're talking about Rupkund, a lake sitting at over 16,000 feet in the Himalayas. But it's not just known by that name. People also call it Mystery Lake, or even more bizarrely, the Skeleton Lake. This place is remote, I mean really remote. It's not just because it's insanely high up, but also because it's surrounded by snow-covered mountains. Now, if you're planning to go there, make sure you have some solid hiking shoes. It's a week-long trek covering more than 30 miles of tough, rugged terrain. Along the way, you'll pass through all kinds of challenging landscapes: moss-covered oak forests, misty fields with an eerie vibe, and up at the top, snow. The highest point of the trek is a knife-edge ridge called Junargali. Just below that lies Rupkund. The closer you get to the lake, the darker the atmosphere feels. And on the ground, you can find human skeletons scattered around, belonging to more than 300 people. Along with them, there were things like wooden artifacts, leather slippers, and rings. Okay, so something really macabre happened here. But what? Well, we have three main theories. Theory number 1, the local legend. According to this story, a long time ago, a king named Raja Justival went on a pilgrimage deep into the Himalayas to reach a sacred mountain temple. He brought his pregnant queen, Rani Balumpa, along with a group of servants, dancers, and others. While they were up in the mountains, a massive hailstorm hit, or as the legend goes, an angry deity started hurling iron balls from the sky. Either way, the storm was brutal, and they had nowhere to take shelter. In the end, they all lost their lives near the lake. Theory number 2, an escape route. Some say the remains belong to Indian soldiers who tried to invade a foreign territory back in 1841, but they were defeated. Over 70 of them were forced to make their way back home through the Himalayas, and they met a tragic end along the way. Theory number 3, a mass grave. This theory suggests that some kind of widespread health issue hit the group. They were all buried there, in isolation, to prevent the disease from spreading. In this case, Rupkund Lake and its surroundings would basically be a cold, remote cemetery. Now, do you know what all these theories have in common? They all assume that the skeletons belong to a single group of people who died in one catastrophic event. But then science came along and things got way creepier. In 2019, 28 scientists from institutions in the US, India, and Germany teamed up for 5 years to figure out what the heck happened up there. They studied the remains of 38 individuals, 23 men and 15 women. And right there, we can already toss out theory number 2. That's important because if these people had been soldiers on a military mission, you would expect most, if not all of them, to be men. Armies in the past were almost entirely male. But here, there were just too many women for that to make sense. And on top of that, no signs of combat or military gear were found at all. After a genetic analysis, researchers noticed that the individuals weren't part of the same family, at least not by blood, like third-degree relatives or closer. And most importantly, they were mostly healthy. These two facts help rule out theory number 3. It probably wasn't some kind of highly contagious health problem. But the most shocking part is that these skeletons didn't belong to just one single group. They actually came from 3 distinct groups. The first group had ancestry that falls within the range of present-day South Asians, basically from the regions that are now India, Pakistan, and Nepal. The second group had ancestry typical of Eastern Mediterranean, just like people from today's Greece, or more specifically from Crete. And they also identified one individual with Southeast Asian-related ancestry. The dating also shows that these remains weren't deposited at the same time. In other words, Groups 1 and 2 didn't live during the same period. Their deaths were actually spread out over as much as 1,000 years. Oh great, now theory number 1 is out the window too. After all, the studies can confirm that these people passed away in at least 2 separate tragic events. According to the researchers, there is a possible clue about where at least some of the people with South Asian ancestry might have come from, or why they were even up there in the first place. Rapkund Lake isn't part of any major trade route or anything like that, but it is along the path of a pilgrimage called the Nanda Devi Raj Jat. It still happens today, once every 12 years, where people hike through the mountains for worship and celebration. Now, the written records of this pilgrimage only show up around the late 1800s, but there are inscriptions in nearby temples that go way back, like to the 8th or 10th century. So, it's possible the tradition started much earlier, and maybe some of these people passed away during one of those early pilgrimages, due to a heavy storm or some other natural disaster. Okay, but how do we explain the group that came from Greece? Well, that's definitely more puzzling. First, because there aren't any historical records or evidence to explain who these people were or what they were doing in the far reaches of the Himalayas, so it's hard to know where to start. The study suggests that they could have been a group of unrelated men and women born in the eastern Mediterranean region around the time the Ottoman Empire controlled that area. The evidence suggests that they had a diet mostly based on land-based foods, not the seafood you would expect from people living near the coast. So they might have lived inland and somehow ended up in the Himalayas, possibly traveling for reasons that researchers can't fully explain yet. The best guess is that they were also participating in a pilgrimage, but honestly, it seems pretty unlikely that people from Europe would have traveled all the way to Rupkund just to do that. And let's assume they did. What exactly happened to them? I mean, how did they all pass away in the same exact spot? Well, the researchers can't say for sure, but people online love to speculate. You think? Some suggest that they fell from the Junagarli Ridge, or since they were at such a high altitude, maybe they passed away due to acute mountain sickness. Up there, the oxygen levels are much lower, which can lead to things like headaches, vomiting, and dizziness. The problem is, it can escalate quickly, and if it affects your lungs and brain, it can become life-threatening. So yeah, it could have happened. But it's still strange to think it happened to so many people all at once. We definitely still need a lot more answers when it comes to Rupkund. But one of the obstacles researchers face is that the site remains highly disturbed and unpreserved. Over the years, trekkers have moved around the skeletons, or worse, some have even taken them home as macabre souvenirs. But the more we mess with those remains, the harder it becomes to find an accurate answer in the future, no matter how much science advances. So, for now, the Mystery Lake will remain exactly that, a big mystery. Well, here you are. You're the first person to set foot on Mars. And your first mission is to explore a place called Jezero Crater. You're wading through the thick, rust-colored dust when suddenly you trip over something and almost fall. You lean closer to examine the culprit and recoil in horror. A skull is staring back at you. Who did it belong to? An ancient Martian dinosaur? A representative of a long-lost civilization? Now, this isn't a made-up story. That's what NASA's Mars robot called Perseverance would tell you if it could speak and, had consciousness. The rover had indeed found something strange, but it wasn't a real skull. It just looked like one. In reality, those were rocks that seemed to be out of place on the red planet. Right now, Perseverance is exploring the edge of a big, empty bowl-shaped area called Jezero Crater. Scientists think that a long time ago, this crater held a giant lake. Perhaps it was even full of tiny life. Since December 2024, the rover has been rolling down a steep hill called Witch Hazel Hill. It's an important mission because this hill might hold secrets about what Mars's weather and environment were like billions of years ago. Anyway, on April 11, 2025, Perseverance stopped to look at a special spot where two types of rock meet. One was light-colored and the other was dark. And right at that spot, scientists saw a weird-looking rock they later named Skull Hill. It stood out dramatically because it was dark and had a sharp shape. But the creepiest thing? It was full of little holes, a real nightmare for those with trypophobia. So NASA shared this discovery in a blog post. They explained that Skull Hill didn't look like the other rocks nearby. The area where Perseverance found these strange rocks is called Port Anson. Scientists think that many of the rocks there didn't originally form in that spot. They were moved from somewhere else an exceptionally long time ago. But how did they move, or what moved them? Now, don't get your hopes up. It doesn't mean we'll find space neighbors on Mars. These kinds of rocks are called floats. They are likely to have traveled a long way across Mars billions of years ago, back when the planet was much warmer and wetter, with rivers, lakes, and maybe even oceans. As the water dried up and the soft ground around the rocks slowly wore away over time, the tougher rocks stayed behind, sitting on the surface. Now scientists are trying to figure out how the strange holes on Skull Hill were made. One idea is that tiny parts of the rock broke off and wore away over time, leaving behind little pits. Another idea is that Martian winds, which carry dust and tiny rocks, might have slowly scraped the surface, kind of like sandpaper, and created the holes. Skull Hill is dark-colored, and at first, scientists thought it might be a meteorite that had come from space. But when they looked more closely at the chemicals in the rock using Perseverance's supercam, the results didn't match what you would expect from a typical meteorite.
Nope.
So, scientists now think Skull Hill might be a volcanic rock. On both Earth and Mars, dark volcanic rocks get their color from minerals like olivine, pyrozine, and biotite. If Skull Hill is volcanic, it might have come from old lava flows nearby that have broken down over time. Or maybe it was blasted out of the rock during a huge crash, something like an asteroid impact that dug deep into the ground and pulled up volcanic rock from below. What helps scientists in their research is that Perseverance now has some cool tricks that help it figure out what Martian rocks are made of. That's how we can learn where the rocks came from and how they formed. Lately, the rover has been super busy. In just a few months, it has collected samples from 5 rocks, studied 7 rocks very closely, and blasted 83 rocks with its laser to learn about them from a distance. That's the fastest pace of research since the rover landed on Mars 4 years ago. At least that's what NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab says. Usually, it can take months to find just one interesting rock in a crater. But up on the edge of the crater, aka the rim, cool and strange rocks are popping up all the time. Scientists are especially excited about getting these rock samples back to Earth to see if they'll show signs that life ever existed on Mars. But there's a problem. The plan to bring the samples back, called the Mars Sample Return Mission, is really complicated, expensive, and running into delays. So, for now, the samples are staying on Mars, waiting for their ride home. Hey, Uber! There's another rover that is currently working hard to help us get more information about our neighbor. That's Curiosity, and it might have found a clue about what happened to Mars's atmosphere from billions of years ago, thick and carbon dioxide rich. If the red planet once had warm temperatures and flowing water, what are the signs of all the carbon that should have been left behind? Now normally, a planet like that would have carbonates, minerals made when carbon dioxide reacts with water and rock buried in its soil. But on Mars, very few carbonates have ever been found, which has been a big mystery. Now, scientists might finally have an answer. A new study suggests that iron carbonate, called siderite, may be hidden inside Mars's sulfate-rich rock layers. These layers weren't easy to spot in satellite images from orbit. That might be the reason why carbonates may have gone unnoticed for so long. At one point in the past, Mars's carbon cycle got out of balance. The rocks started pulling in more carbon dioxide than they were releasing. Over time, this may have caused Mars to lose too much CO2 from its atmosphere. It cooled the planet and made it dry and lifeless. The planet might have been still habitable when this happened, but once carbon dioxide started turning into siderite, Mars may have begun getting too cold to support life. The Curiosity rover found these carbon-rich rocks in Gale Crater, an area on Mars that used to be full of water. The rocks also contain a lot of salts, which usually form when water dries up. This supports the idea that Mars went through some huge changes, likely from a planet with a nice climate to the cold, dry world we see today. If scientists find more siderite in other parts of Mars, it could help explain where all that ancient carbon dioxide went. Even better, it would support the idea that Mars was once warm, wet, and maybe even habitable. But that's not the only discovery Curiosity has made. The rover has a set of special instruments called SAM. Now, SAM's job is to study the rocks, dirt, and air on Mars to learn more about the planet. And one of SAM's biggest findings happened when it studied rocks from Gale Crater. SAM found organic molecules. Organic molecules are special because they're made of carbon, and on Earth, carbon is super important for life. Plants, animals, and people are all made from carbon-based molecules. So, finding these molecules on Mars makes scientists wonder if it's another proof that Mars once had life, a long, long time ago. When SAM looked even closer, it found certain patterns in gases like carbon dioxide and methane. These patterns might match what you would expect if tiny ancient life forms were making organic molecules. But there's also another explanation. These molecules might have been made by sunlight reacting with gases in Mars's air. In this case, no life would have been involved at all. On Mars, strong ultraviolet light from the sun can break apart and mix up molecules, creating new ones that eventually land on the ground. So even though scientists don't have a clear answer yet, finding organic molecules is a really big deal. At the very least, it tells us that Mars had the right ingredients for life, even if we don't know yet if life actually existed there. Now, scientists are using SAM and Curiosity's other tools to keep searching for more clues. Around 150,000 years ago, the Dragon Men, with huge skulls, square eye sockets, and enormous teeth, used to roam the frosty forests of northern China. They didn't get their name after fire-breathing monsters, though, but after a river where construction workers accidentally found the first skull in 1933. The skull that came from the river mud was large and nearly complete, with an elongated cranium and a heavy brow bone. It must have looked so crazy that the worker who found it decided to hide it for years in an abandoned well. Before passing away in 2018, he told his grandchildren about his secret find, and they rushed to the well. Scientists got their hands on the skull only in 2021. They noticed an odd mishmash of features. A squat and wide skull, like in ancient hominins, a tooth with 3 roots that you'd rarely see today, and at the same time, delicate cheekbones, which are common now. To identify the find, a team of scientists studied 95 old skulls, jawbones, and teeth from different ancient human groups. They carefully examined over 600 details on these fossils to understand how these ancient humans were related. Then, they used a super powerful computer to create billions of family trees showing how these groups evolved over time. The goal was to find the simplest path of evolution, which most scientists think is the most likely way things happened. After all the calculations, the tree showed that the Dragon Man skull belonged to a new branch of ancient humans, and it turned out to be very closely related to modern human mammals. Researchers found out that the skull belonged to a man who lived at least 146,000 years ago in East Asia. Back then, modern humans, or Homo sapiens, lived alongside other human-like relatives, like the Neanderthals and Denisovans. The discovery of the Dragon Man, or Homo longi, as they also call him, could rewrite the story of human evolution. It might be closer to modern humans than even the Neanderthals. We just had no idea what his face looked like until now. A scientist from Brazil created a 3D digital model of Dragon Man's face based on his skull. Since some parts of the skull were missing, he used a complete skull from another ancient human, Homo erectus, to fill in the gaps. He then used special scans from modern humans and chimpanzees to figure out how the skin and muscles would fit on the skull. To make the model look more realistic and lifelike, the scientist also added hair and colors to bring Dragon Man to life. The final model showed that Dragon Man had the biggest head of any ancient human ever found, nearly 26 inches around. That means his skull was as big as a gorilla's, or even a lion's. Scientists believe that his generous size may have helped him survive the freezing cold winters of Harbin, where they found the skull, and where temperatures still drop to only 3 degrees today. Now, not all scientists agree that Dragon Man is a completely new species or where it belongs in the human family tree. Some experts think the skull's unique features might just be because of its size, rather than proof that it's a distinct species. People from the same species can look different based on their age, gender, where they lived, and how old the fossil is. Some scientists compare it to another skull found in China, which is considered part of another already well-studied species. Then there's the mystery of the Denisovans, an ancient human group that lived in Asia for thousands of years but left very few fossils behind. The closest match to Dragon Man might be a broken jawbone found in Tibet in 2019. Some scientists believe that means Dragon Man could be a Denisovan, but others aren't so sure because the Harbin skull has no jaw to compare it to. Scientists first discovered Denisovans in 2008 when they found a small piece of a finger bone in Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains. They learned that the bone had belonged to a little girl who was between 5 and 7 years old when she passed away around 40,000 years ago. The freezing weather in the cave had kept the bone in excellent condition. A couple of years later, another team of scientists managed to extract DNA from the find. They compared it to the DNA of modern humans and another ancient human species, Neanderthals. Her DNA was similar to both, but it was also different enough to show that she was part of an entirely new species of humans. No one had known about this group before. The scientists decided to name it Denisovans, after the cave where they found her tiny finger bone. Later, they discovered 3 more Denisovan fossils, including some teeth also inside the same cave. Researchers still aren't sure where the Denisovans came from, but one idea is that they were related to Homo erectus. These were the earliest humans who looked a lot like us, with long legs and shorter arms, making them great walkers. About 700,000 years ago, some of them left Africa and traveled all the way to Eurasia. They became the great-great-great-grandparents of both Denisovans and Neanderthals. Around 370,000 years ago, these two groups split up. Neanderthals went west to Europe and Western Asia, while Denisovans went east to East Asia and Southeast Asia. Some Denisovans even made it to the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and beyond, crossing the Wallace Line, which separates Asia from Australia. More recently, scientists studied the DNA of many people from Southeast Asia and found that Denisovans might not have been just one group of ancient humans, but 3 distinct kinds. One of these groups was as different from other Denisovans as Neanderthals were. Some Denisovans may have lived longer than the Neanderthals, who disappeared around 40,000 years ago. A study suggests that one group of Denisovans lived alongside modern humans in New Guinea until at least 30,000 years ago, and maybe even as recently as 15,000 years ago. If that's true, they were the last humans on Earth besides us. This surprising discovery is part of a growing number of finds showing that ancient Asia was full of various versions of humans, including the newly discovered kind in the Philippines. Scientists now realize that the islands of Southeast Asia were a hotspot for early humans. They believe learning more about early humans could help them better understand the genetic properties of people in Indonesia and neighboring regions, and even improve healthcare in the region. Researchers found special clues in their DNA that show ancient human groups split apart an exceptionally long time ago. When Homo sapiens traveled from Africa, they formed families with other early humans and passed small pieces of those ancient relatives' DNA down through the generations. Scientists still don't know for sure why Denisovans and Neanderthals disappeared while Homo sapiens survived. One plausible reason is that Neanderthals and Denisovans lived in small, close-knit groups, which may have caused health problems over time. Our ancient ancestors lived in big groups with more genetic variety, which helped them stay healthier and adapt to changes. Another big advantage was that Homo sapiens had strong social networks. They shared innovative ideas, tools, and survival skills. In the end, Denisovans couldn't handle the tremendous changes happening on Earth and slowly disappeared. The Sahara Desert is like a Mad Max movie. Scorching heat, endless dunes, and an overall barren wasteland. A place where no one could live, right? Well, forget all you know about it, because 5,000 years ago, the Sahara was a lush paradise of grasslands, lakes, and rivers, and the home of a ghost civilization that vanished without a trace. Our tale begins in the 1930s, when a Hungarian explorer stumbled upon a cave in the middle of the Sahara. Inside, he found something bizarre: ancient rock paintings of people swimming in a lake, surrounded by giraffes, hippos, and crocodiles. At the time, everybody shrugged it off as some symbolic depiction of the afterlife, because, really, who would imagine a lake in the Sahara? Well, fast forward some 70 years later, when a group of archaeologists made a discovery that flipped the script. In a rock shelter in Libya, they unearthed 15 mummies, along with baskets, ceramic pots, and other everyday items. This may look like prehistoric junk to most people, but to archaeologists, it was like uncovering a key piece of evidence. Those people weren't just passing through, they lived here. You see, those weren't just any mummies. They were some of the oldest naturally mummified humans ever found, dating back over 7,000 years. Take that, Egypt. Two of them still had readable DNA, preserved thanks to a rare natural mummification process, almost a miracle considering the Sahara's climate's ability to turn everything into, well, beef jerky. Scientists struggled to understand where those mummies came from for a while, because the mitochondrial DNA they recovered was not helpful at all. But thanks to scientific progress, they eventually managed to do a full genome analysis that revealed some weird secrets. Those people belonged to a human lineage that was completely unknown, and they lived isolated from the rest of humanity for thousands of years. For decades, researchers assumed that the place where they lived, the Green Sahara, was like a prehistoric highway, a lush corridor that humans and animals used to migrate between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean. But the mummies demolished that theory, like a hippo sitting on a sandcastle. Their DNA showed zero genetic mixing with sub-Saharan and Eurasian migrants, keeping their genes pure for 7,000 years. Their closest genetic relatives weren't their neighbors living right below the famous desert, but some ancient hunter-gatherers from Morocco, and even some guys that lived in the Czech Republic, when it wasn't even a country yet, 50,000 years ago. We're not out of the woods yet, because those mummies also carried some teeny-tiny traces of Neanderthal DNA, just 10% of the amount found in modern Eurasians. Now, if you paid attention in school, then you know that Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia, and early humans only mixed with them after migrating out of Africa. But those Green Sahara folks never left Africa. So how did they get Neanderthal genes? The leading theory is that their ancestors mingled with Neanderthals in North Africa 50,000 years ago before settling in the Sahara and cutting off contact with the outside world. Archaeologists also found cattle bones and tools made of stone and wood at that rock shelter, proving that those people led a thriving pastoral lifestyle. This discovery made scientists scratch their heads for a while because, you see, animal domestication was not developed in Africa. So how did they learn it if they never mingled with anyone? Did they have ancient YouTube tutorials? Probably not. The researchers believe they must have traded knowledge with neighboring groups, but just knowledge, no saliva. It's almost too hard to believe that no outsiders mixed with them. After all, who wouldn't want to live in a thriving civilization in the middle of a green paradise, drinking milk, eating meat, and even using animal blood as a protein source? Ooh, yummy. They didn't have to hunt for every meal, thanks to their livestock, and the abundant water made life pretty sweet. and yet they never married outsiders. Why? Maybe it was a cultural choice to never date outside their own group, or maybe the landscape itself kept them isolated. This is where scientists place their bets. They believe that the dense forests and rivers that existed in the Green Sahara acted like nature's no trespassing sign, creating a geographical barrier that isolates animals, plants, and whole societies. This isolation is the reason why their genes were so unique. These guys weren't swapping spit with anyone else. But this genetic time capsule almost didn't survive. For most of the last ice age, the Sahara was even harsher than today, a true dead zone where humans couldn't survive. 70,000 years ago, even the toughest people disappeared, retreating to the Nile Valley and the Mediterranean coast. Why? Because Earth was a climate bully. Massive glaciers stole all the moisture, weakening monsoons until rain clouds barely reached North Africa. Then came the knockout punches. Armadas of icebergs flooded the North Atlantic, triggering devastating droughts each time. This was the Sahara's ultimate keep-out era. Now, you're probably wondering how in the world the Sahara turned green after all this, and then went back to being a desert again. Well, it all started 15,000 years ago — I wasn't around then — when Earth was shaking off the last ice age. Our planet's axis was a bit wobbly, and because of that, the northern hemisphere got closer to the sun, getting extra sunlight and heat. This eternal summer turned North Africa into a giant moisture magnet, pulling water from the Atlantic and making it all rain down on the Sahara. The result of this ridiculous amount of rain was a lush savanna, complete with lakes the size of small countries. But the African humid period was not just a one-time miracle. The truth is, this eternal on and off switch between green and desert happened to the Sahara more than 230 times since the desert was born. During one of these events, the Sahara even expanded, getting bigger than it is today. So when the Green Sahara showed up, you can bet it brought the ultimate ecosystem glow-up. This wasn't just a light dusting of grass. We're talking full makeover. The transformation was so complete, it even reshaped animal populations. Cheetahs suddenly struggled with the new prey dynamics, while rodents like the multi-mammate mouse thrived in the suddenly abundant grasslands. But don't pack your prehistoric swim trunks just yet. This paradise had teeth. The Sahara was an ecological maze of crocodile-infested rivers, malaria-carrying mosquitoes, and big cats lurking in the tall grass. Crossing it would have been like playing a real-life game of Hungry Hungry Hippos. This is probably why more groups didn't settle permanently. The Sahara's climate cycled between wet and dry every 20,000 years, hardly a stable zip code. For most ancient people, it was smarter to treat the Green Sahara like an all-you-can-eat buffet, grab resources and leave before the desert returned. Still, this Green Sahara period lasted for 10,000 years, giving our mystery shepherds plenty of time to thrive. But around 5,000 years ago, Earth's axis shifted again, the rains moved away, and the Sahara dried up faster than a puddle in July. As the desert returned, the shepherds from the Green Sahara had no choice but to pack up their livestock and leave. Some researchers believe they migrated toward the Nile, laying the groundwork for ancient Egypt, so I guess their legacy lives on. Besides, their pure lineage may be extinct by now, but some faint genes of the mummies can still be found in the people that live in North Africa today. But the introvert mummies were not the only ones using the Green Sahara as an Airbnb. They actually had neighbors just around the corner, in a lakeside village in Niger to be exact. Those people thrived for 5,000 years and left behind the oldest Sahara Desert cemetery, including a man buried in a turtle shell, a grinning Halloween man with filed teeth, and a heartbreaking family embrace frozen in time, victims of the very waters that sustained them. Eventually, those people disappeared too, just like it happened to our antisocial friends. This proves that this desert outsmarts everyone, with a landscape that gives paradise with one hand and takes it away with the other.
Have you heard of Göbekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric humans crafted an enigmatic masterpiece that's even older than Stonehenge. Before its discovery, archaeologists believed that people didn't know about iron and weren't good at making pottery. They were sure that settled life only emerged with the need for agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe changed this belief. The place has revealed that it was the temple that paved the way for a settled life, not agriculture. Until this discovery, researchers believed that farming was the catalyst for sedentary living. Meet Professor Schmidt, the guy whose findings changed this theory. He managed to prove that hunter-gatherer communities laid the very foundations of this way of life. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists visited the area, but they totally missed the mark. While surveying the region, they stumbled upon a hill with scattered limestone slabs and concluded it was just an old burial ground from medieval times. Little did they know that there was so much more to uncover. In 1994, Schmidt embarked on his own survey of prehistoric sites in the area. Surprise! He instantly realized he had discovered something truly extraordinary. Unlike the nearby flat and barren plateaus, Göbekli Tepe had a gently rounded top, rising 50 feet above the surrounding landscape. Funny enough, the translation of this place's name is Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was sure only humans could have made something like this. Those broken limestone pieces that were mistaken for gravestones turned out to be way more exciting. It was like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The pieces took on a whole new meaning, and Schmidt with his team was about to dive into the secrets waiting beneath the surface. To their surprise, they found no traces of a settlement. No hearths for cooking, no houses, and none of those adorable clay figurines commonly found in nearby sites of similar age. However, they uncovered that those ancient people used tools like stone hammers. So, Schmidt and his team put their heads together and took a wild guess at the age of Göbekli Tepe's stone structures. Their estimation got backed up by some limited carbon dating done right at the site. The ancient vibes of this place were finally starting to make sense. It was like a puzzle slowly coming together. You may think that back then, people didn't have special tools to create something as cool as Göbekli Tepe. Not true. Turns out, these prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were also skilled at chipping away softer limestone and crafting pillars right on the spot. Afterward, they carried the pillars a short distance to the summit and placed them upright. Once the stone rings were complete, they covered them with layers of dirt. Over time, they added new rings, and voila! You've got a cool hill to impress people in the future. During their first year of excavation, the team went through 15,000 pieces of animal bones from wild creatures. These people didn't have pet animals or grow their own food. They hunted wild animals for their meals. But things were about to change, because the place had everything they needed to start farming. Scientists say they had wild sheep and wild grains that could be domesticated. And guess what? Just 20 miles away, geneticists found evidence of the world's oldest domesticated strains of wheat at a prehistoric village. These amazing findings have completely changed how we view civilization. In the past, experts believed that people needed to learn how to farm and settle in one place before they could build temples and develop complex societies. But guess what? Schmidt's research flips that idea on its head. He claims that the incredible effort put into constructing these astonishing structures actually set the stage for the development of advanced societies. It means that societal and cultural changes happened before agriculture. Schmidt has this fascinating hypothesis about Göbekli Tepe. He thinks it could have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones. And here's the twist. The burial site was adorned with fancy statues and symbols representing deities from the spiritual realm. The idea that Göbekli Tepe could have served as a sacred place adds another layer of complexity to the whole story. While the site's true purpose may remain elusive, Schmidt's insights invite us to consider the profound interplay between life and the afterlife, and the deep reverence ancient hunter-gatherer societies may have had for their departed ancestors. Now let's talk about the stars of the show, the mesmerizing T-shaped columns that dominate Göbekli Tepe. These mysterious structures range from 10 to 20 feet tall and most likely represent stylized human figures. But one figure stands out from the rest, the three-dimensional lion relief. This depiction really fires up our imagination. Why? Because it hints at the possibility that lions roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic period. These standing stones are arranged in circles and placed in rectangular pits. Each circle has a similar setup. Two big T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by slightly smaller ones facing inward. Talk about a stylish arrangement. These towering pillars reach a whopping 16 feet and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some pillars are plain and simple, while others are like works of art with intricate carvings. Foxes, scorpions, and vultures come to life, crawling and twisting on the pillars' sides. But it's not just animals depicted on these stones. Some pillars have abstract shapes representing humans, and even small carvings of clothing items. Some of them even have belts. Now, there's one pillar that stands out from the rest like a rock star. This super old stone pillar suggests that a comet crashed into Earth. It happened during a chilly period that lasted about 1,000 years. Previous studies examining Greenland ice cores hinted at this comet theory, but now the carvings at Göbekli Tepe prove it right. The carvings on the pillars are like a historical comic strip. They even show a headless human figure. Researchers fed the images into a computer and discovered their connections to constellations, indicating that this temple might have been an ancient observatory. It's like our ancestors were trying to document this cataclysmic event in their own unique way. Archaeologists have been excavating and researching Göbekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and providing us with a deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between various elements. They have no plans to stop the whole process for another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll find? You see, Göbekli Tepe has been labeled purely as a ritual site with no signs of domestic activities. We were led to believe that the absence of water meant it couldn't support semi-sedentary communities. But scientists believe it's time to shake things up and approach Göbekli Tepe with fresh eyes. It's time to question what we believed before and use new evidence and different ways of thinking. Like, there might have been a group of people living in the area who didn't stay in one place all the time. They moved around a bit but still had their own civilization, living in the area semi-sedentarily. Göbekli Tepe is not just home to a single temple, but an astounding collection of over 20 ancient structures. As archaeologists delve into the depths of this wonder, they are unraveling its unique layout, featuring two prominent focal points at the heart of each establishment, complemented by smaller structures and dividing walls. What's even crazier is that in this area, there are over 200 obelisks, which are narrow tapering monuments.
Can you imagine that all modern humans came from about 1,000 people? Around 800,000 to 900,000 years ago, almost all of our ancestors disappeared, leaving about 1% of the population behind. So, what the heck happened? The Earth often goes through glacial cycles, things that we call ice ages. Back in the past, they were pretty mild and happened regularly, about every 41,000 years. The ice ages happened because of the Earth's axis. Our planet is slightly tilted at an angle, which is why its axis isn't straight up. Over thousands of years, this tilt has changed a bit. This teeny-tiny shift completely changes how much sunlight we receive, especially at the poles, and leads to incredibly strong cold or warm periods. About 2.6 million years ago, when early humans were settling in on Earth, the Pleistocene epoch started. That's the era we traditionally call the Ice Age, the one from the movies. Large ice sheets completely covered parts of North America, Europe, and Asia. It wasn't constant ice everywhere all the time. These glacial cycles came and went, and sometimes ice sheets melted for a while. But overall, things were still much snowier and colder compared to now. We can still see the evidence of this from back in the day. Those glaciers carved out valleys and left behind some awesome things like moraines and fjords. And since sea levels were super low, a huge part of the world was land. This allowed people and animals to travel between continents and spread everywhere. It was the time of the megafauna. You all know about it from the movies. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, and mastodons. Our ancestors had some fun times hunting all those giants. Now, humans didn't come from one lineage. It wasn't like monkeys slowly turned into humans. We also consisted of many species: Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and so on. But only one species, Homo sapiens, survived and turned into modern humans. Harsh conditions forced them to get smarter. They learned how to make tools, clothing, and shelters to survive. They became hunter-gatherers and invented fire, which turned out to be super useful during the Ice Age, you think? But they had no idea what horrible change was coming. Something disastrous happened about 800,000 to 900,000 years ago. Humans faced a drastic population crash. Only 1,280 people survived, give or take. Some 99% of early humans were wiped out, and this tiny 1% was lucky enough to become our ancestors. This almost extinction, unsurprisingly, was the climate's fault. It was the Middle Pleistocene transition. The Earth's orbit around the Sun changed its shape a bit. Carbon levels dropped. A lot of stuff was happening, and the Earth's climate was going wild, becoming incredibly cold and dry. The seas suddenly got chillier, and Africa and Eurasia experienced horrible droughts. Looking for food was almost impossible. Scientists learned this by taking the DNA of about 300,000 people from all around the world. They used a new method to help them map the history of human evolution over 1 million years and learn more about it. No wonder we can barely find any fossils from that time. There was almost no one around. What's interesting is that before that happened, most apes had 24 pairs of chromosomes. But because the population became so small, 2 sets got fused together, and we ended up with 23 pairs. This was the final straw that separated us from other apes. Chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans all have 24 pairs, but our fused one became known as the human chromosome. Like a ripple effect, this little thing influenced our brain side, helped us start walking on our toes, and even form language. It took humans about 100,000 years to recover from this catastrophe. Only after all that time, they started spreading around again. Isn't that insane how we managed to go from 1,000 to 8 billion people? In any case, the Ice Age finally ended about 11,700 years ago. The warm period, called the Holocene, began. As things got warmer, human civilizations finally began to develop. 5,000 years ago, it was ancient Egypt, then the Indus Valley Civilization, ancient China, and others. And while we've been thriving for a while, there's one catch. The Middle Pleistocene transition changed the length and intensity of glacial cycles. Before the transition, sure, there was the Ice Age, but the cold was milder, and the glacial cycles were shorter. Things got covered in ice sheets about every 41,000 years. But after the transition, the glacial periods became longer and more severe. These cycles started following a new pattern. Although they happened every 100,000 years, they were super intense. Ice sheets grew large, even extending to the south. So from now on, ice ages that will continue to happen in the future will be a bit different. The next one should be at least 50,000 years from now, maybe longer. It's good for us because it'll occur later. But at the same time, the consequences will be stronger. What our ancestors went through is called a population bottleneck. That's what we call a sudden and huge reduction in the size of a population. Usually it happens because of things like earthquakes, floods or droughts, fires, and even human actions. Just a few people survive, and only they can pass their genes to future generations. And we've got plenty of such bottlenecks in history. Our modern species, Homo sapiens, originally lived in Africa. Around 60 to 80,000 years ago, a small group of them left Africa and spread across the world. It wasn't on a whim, though. They had to move somewhere because of the droughts and huge climate problems in Africa at that time. They had to go look for food and find new places to live. They traveled through the Middle East, moving into Europe and Asia, and eventually reaching Australasia and the Americas. They quickly settled across different continents and started mixing with local human-like species, like Denisovans and Neanderthals. But there was a problem. Originally, the African species were super genetically diverse, but since only a small part of them decided to move out, they carried just a bunch of these diverse genes with them. Unfortunately, this caused a bottleneck for everyone. Human-like species from other parts of the world became less genetically diverse. Since they had a smaller gene pool, they became more vulnerable to all the harmful stuff. The African population also had a drop in genetic diversity. But at least humans managed to survive. Although eventually, non-African populations really dropped, and there were no Neanderthals or Denisovans left, only us, Homo sapiens. That's why we can say that all modern humans came from Africa. Early humans sure had it rough. About 74,000 years ago, they went through yet another disaster, the Topa catastrophe. But keep in mind that all these things are just a hypothesis. It's not certain whether it actually happened. Now basically, scientists think that there might have been a supervolcanic eruption at Lake Toba in Sumatra, Indonesia. This volcano going crazy was an absolute catastrophe for Earth's climate and humans. The eruption was one of the most powerful volcanic events in the last 2 million years. It spewed out from 670 to 1,500 cubic miles of lava and volcanic stuff. Just so you know, there are about 3,100 cubic miles of water in our planet's entire atmosphere, and this eruption had almost half as much lava. This horrendous disaster led to the formation of Lake Toba, a massive caldera lake in Sumatra. It also spewed out tons of ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. This caused the so-called volcanic winter, which means that while it's not actually winter, the temperatures drop and the planet is freezing because all these ash clouds are blocking the sunlight from reaching the Earth. This event affected climate patterns for years to decades. This also most likely sped up the arrival of the next glacial cycle. Luckily, humans are crazy good at surviving. The global human population was reduced to a few thousand people yet again, and they still managed to overcome this. There's an amazing place in Ethiopia, East Africa, called Hadar. This place is a treasure trove. We found tons of old animal fossils there. And among those remnants, we discovered something very special, the fossils of a creature called Australopithecus afarensis. One of these guys was found almost complete. You might know it today by the name Lucy, after a famous song by the Beatles. Lucy was a small lady, only about as tall as a kitchen counter. She lived 3.2 million years ago and became a huge celebrity when we found her in 1974. She helped us learn more about our early ancestors, creatures called Australopithecines. Around 10 to 12 million years ago, there was a group of animals that broke into two branches. One of the branches led to modern apes, while the other led to humans. This separation happened because one group decided to stay in trees and became what we now call gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans. They moved around using all four limbs and lived in forests. But the other group decided to live on the ground and try walking on two legs. Because of that, their brains started getting bigger over time. And over millions of years, they became bald monkeys who watch videos on YouTube. Yeah, you know who you are. Lucy, like other Australopiths, was a bit different from us. She still looked like an ape and lived during a transitional stage. She could walk on two legs, but didn't do it all the time. Sometimes she climbed trees, just like a monkey. She and her buddies were the first step in human evolution. Then came a new branch of evolution, Homo habilis, or handyman. They were the first members of the Homo genus because they were the ones to start developing stone tools and first show human creativity. They probably used these tools for scavenging and processing food. We found the first clues about them back in the 1960s. They walked around East Africa about 3 million years ago. They were pretty small, about 4 feet 7 inches tall. They didn't climb trees anymore and mostly walked on the ground. Their skull shape already resembled ours, unlike the more pear-shaped heads of Australopiths. That's because they had larger brains. After them, we had Homo erectus, the upright man. They lived about 2 million to 70,000 years ago. The name hints that this was the first hominin species that walked on two legs almost all the time. They were also the first to migrate out of Africa, spreading to Asia and Europe. And here, we had the real breakthrough. Representatives of Homo erectus had even larger brains and learned to make more creative and advanced tools. They created the first choppers, cleavers, and hammers, and used flakes as scrapers and knives. They probably used a lot of things – wood, bark, and even grass to make the first strings and ropes. With all that, they learned how to hunt large animals and probably hunted together a lot. They were also the first ones to start using fire, which changed our history forever. Over time, more Homo species emerged, including the famous Neanderthals. They're known for their European roots. They split from our common ancestor around 400,000 years ago. Now, even though we share one common ancestor, we didn't evolve from Neanderthals. They were a separate branch. All Neanderthals went extinct, but our evolutionary branch coexisted with them a long time ago. Neanderthals were resourceful, hunting both land and sea creatures. They left behind thousands of stone tools and even decorated caves with paintings. They had their own ceremonies, too. They started to bury those who passed away. They probably noticed that leaving them in the wild leads to spreading diseases and attracting scavengers. But they also showed care and love in their burial rituals. Then it was time for archaic Homo sapiens. They lived around 500,000 to 200,000 years ago, emerging in Africa and Europe. This was the last leg between our ancestors and our modern species, Homo sapiens. The brain just kept getting bigger. They started to show more complex behaviors, not only burial and interesting stone tools, but also smart hunting strategies and planning for the future. They probably had a diverse diet that included both hunting and gathering. And finally, we reached the anatomically modern Homo sapiens. They emerged around 200,000 years ago in Africa. They had a similar skeletal structure and brain size to modern humans, and their behavior was pretty close to ours. They had complex social structures, started thinking in symbols, and so on. They migrated out of Africa around 60,000 years ago, spreading across the globe and eventually replacing other hominin species, such as Neanderthals. They started to create their first languages and form their first words. The first words were probably very simple, like "ah" to call someone and "ma" for babies. After evolving into our final stage, we started advancing in our cultural and technological development. This development became very rapid over the last 200,000 years. About 12,000 years ago, the Neolithic period, also known as the New Stone Age, began. It marked the end of the glacial period. Humans started living in settled villages instead of constantly moving around. This change was brought about by the advent of agriculture, which allowed people to grow crops and raise animals like goats and sheep. Early humans started to domesticate animals, such as sheepdogs, for herding. We also started making the first art, leaving famous drawings in caves, handprints, animals, mostly cows, hunting, and many others. We even created the first currency. We began using clay tokens for transactions. This marked the beginning of commerce and the use of money. And finally, we started writing. And now the events could be recorded and passed down through written records. This is when history officially began. From that point on, we saw the development of agriculture, the rise of complex societies, the invention of writing and the wheel, and the emergence of civilizations. Our tools became more and more sophisticated, languages appeared, leading to the diverse cultures and societies seen today. So, why have we stopped evolving? The truth is, we haven't. Human evolution is an ongoing process, although it's not as dramatic as it used to be. We adapt to different environments, have different skin tones, appearances, body sizes, and genetic mutations that have influenced traits like lactose intolerance or resistance to certain diseases. But the world we live in today is very different from the one our ancestors inhabited. We don't suffer as much because we've developed technology, culture, and social systems. Thanks to this, evolution slowed down, seeing that we're doing okay as we are now. What we started experiencing is cultural evolution rather than a physical one. Plus, 200,000 years is a pretty short time period, considering the time span of the universe or even of our Earth. We should see what happens to us in hundreds of thousands of years. I won't be around then, but there are some theories about that. There's a big idea that, in the future, humans and machines might merge into one super being. We call it technological singularity, a state where we humans lead our technologies to the point where we won't be able to control their development anymore. For example, if AI gets so advanced, it will change everything about how we live. Despite the current rise of AI, we shouldn't be too worried about it taking over the world, at least not in the next few decades. All we've developed now is weak artificial intelligence, little simulations. They might look scary to those who don't know much about AI, but the truth is, they have yet far to go before they reach the grand complexity of the human brain, not to mention consciousness. However, many people believe it's only a matter of time before AI reaches this level of intelligence, and then our world might change forever. There are other possibilities too. For example, one day we might reach a level where we merge with machines and learn to upload our consciousness in the cloud. In that case, we might become a hive mind, taking over the internet using our brains, becoming one giant consciousness. No matter what happens in the future, one thing's certain: technology is changing fast, and it's going to affect all of us sooner or later.